Hello, aspirants. Welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm here, Harpreet Singh, with a daily analysis of the Hindu from 9th of October 2024. So let's move ahead. This is a Telegram account where you can basically find this particular PDF. You can revise through it to make your notes if you want. Along with it, various other materials are posted here, which are important for your preparation. What all topics we have taken for today's analysis? Please note that these other topics for today. Along with that, from tomorrow, we are going to have a separate section which will be dealing with news in shorts, which will be specially targeted towards those tit and bits that come in your newspaper, which are important for your preliminary preparation also. So please note here. First is Global Digital Compact, Textile Industry Issues, National Sports Policy 2024 draft that has been there, an editorial that deals with the coal-fired plants, and the example of United Kingdom has been given and how India can get or take lessons from United Kingdom. So let's move ahead and see what the topics are. First topic is the Global Digital Compact. Now, with respect to prelims as well as mains, this becomes very, very important. Now, what this particular thing is, what are the objectives, what are the principles, what are the dimensions associated with them? Let's have a look. Please understand, Global Digital Compact or GDC is a United Nations initiative that aims to establish to have a shared vision for a secure, open and inclusive digital future. So that means we very well know that the future lies in those digital technologies and the interconnections and the interdependence between those devices and the digital technologies that are taking place or going on through the means of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so many new technologies coming there. So this particular Global Digital Compact focus on that it should be secure. That means if privacy issues are there or infringement is there or let us say hacking is there, then we have to have a protocol, we have to have dimensions and preventive measures open that it should be for everybody. Next is inclusive. That means again, nobody should be excluded from the gains that are basically derived from the particular digital revolution that is taking place. Like for example, if you are right now seeing this particular video, you're benefiting out of the access to these videos you have via the YouTube. So this is again one of the mediums that we basically see. Now, it is a comprehensive framework for global governance for digital technology and AI. Now, this is an important aspect. Why global governance? Because it basically gives certain standardizations. It basically tells what type of protocols should be followed and adhered to while we are transitioning towards more and more adoption of the technologies like artificial intelligence and other concepts that are associated with that. So this is again a very, very important role. Again, repeating, it is an initiative that aims to have or should have, let us say, a secure, open and inclusive digital future. That is once for everybody. Everybody should reap the benefits out of this digital future that is taking place or digital revolution that is taking place. Along with it, we need to take care that it is for everybody. It is also secure, privacy concerns are adhered to, and obviously human development dimensions, economic development, social development dimensions are also associated with that. As we move ahead, please understand what are the objectives. Now, these are the objectives that are basically taken from the original document of GDC. So let's see. First, close all digital divides and accelerate the progress towards the sustainable development goals. These are the goals which are basically expected to be achieved by 2030. A list of goals with respect to poverty, let us say inclusion, hunger, so many goals are already there. So it is basically aiming at closing the digital divides. That means certain people have more access to the digital devices or the, let us say, internet technologies and all. On the other hand, many are excluded. So need to lessen or close this digital divide that is existing. Next, expand the inclusion in and benefits from the digital economy for all. For example, you see the online mediums or digital mediums have themselves been a major revolution, not only from the technology aspect, but also from the economic angle. People are earning a lot of money through that. So we're basically saying that it should be more inclusive, that let the other people also benefit out of that. Foster an inclusive, open, safe, and secure digital space that promotes the human rights, protects and promotes the human rights. That means, see, if the digital revolution is taking place, it comes with, again, various concerns also. We realize that industries like, let us say, pornography, let us say, trafficking, all these things are also associated with the digital aspects and increase in the digital penetration. So what is important again? Security, privacy, and all these dimensions become very important because we realize that cyber security is a must. Because of latestly, we have seen that various government sites in India and across the world have been hacked by various infringing groups or non-state actors. So that creates a lot of issue. Again, advance, responsible, equitable, and interoperable data governance approaches. See, we all know that government has a data, let us say Aadhaar. And government has a data associated with all the people who are residing here. Similarly, various governments also have. Now, please understand that it should be responsible. Privacy concerns should be adhered to. Misuse should not be there. Preventing of data leaks also becomes very important, not only from the perspective of the government, but also from the perspective of the private companies. Because you know that the moment you, let us say, go to some website, there is a clause that comes into here. We can access all your cookies, let us say, or for example, you can, when you download an app, it's written there, access your contact, your messages, your logbook. So automatically they're having access to all the information that you're going through in your mobile phones. So these are also things to what extent that should be, how that should be adhered to, what are the standards that should be there. So all these things are basically dealt in over here. Enhance international governance of AI for the benefit of humanity. It is very important now. Realize that AI is the future, we all know. There are two important things that you will be seeing influencing the digital revolution. First is AI and the second is the cyber security sector. Because as you see, AI is rising. Automatically, we have the concept of supercomputers also coming in, which can basically decode those encryptions at a very faster pace. So again, we need to have a strong cybersecurity network. Along with it, we need to have certain standards for the artificial intelligence also. We have seen various movies coming up which show the threat of artificial intelligence. The governments are also aware that you need to have international governance standards. That means you should have international cooperation between or among the countries. Along with it, certain standardization should be made with respect to the AI rules. As we move ahead, we see there are certain principles that are involved. Now see, these principles again become important. Please remember, in the examination, you can be asked, what do you mean by GDC? What are the objectives and what are the principles involved? Now, these are the principles that are involved with respect to GDC. First, inclusive participation. That means it is for everybody, irrespective of the gender, irrespective of the caste, irrespective of the social strata, class, or anything. Next, development orientation, rooted in the Sustainable Development Goals. That means in the Sustainable Development Goals also, when we're talking about inclusion, the digital inclusion and information inclusion is also an essential ingredient of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it is in synchronization with the Sustainable Development Goals. Next, anchored in international human rights law. Again, why do these happen? We realize that the digital platforms can be used or go against the human rights, whether it is, say, we have already mentioned human trafficking, flesh trade. These are certain dimensions which go against the humanity. So we have the concept of dark web, where sale of weapons at a large scale are taking place, and that is something that is beyond the comprehensive ability of various governments also. So that also needs to be in some or the other ways adhere to certain dimensions should be there, so that all these nefarious activities that are taking place can to a certain extent be controlled, or certain action can be taken against them. So what we see, again, international human rights aspect do come into being. Gender equality, that means it should not be that one gender is excluded from the revolution or the digital revolution that is taking place. So it should be, again, with respect to male, female, and the other or the third genders also should have the access. That is again very important. Next, advanced digital technologies. Now, you very well know that when we're talking about artificial intelligence, machine learnings, Internet of Things, all these things. So what is that? It uses advanced technologies. It uses the concept of metadata. It uses the concept of supercomputing. So even the concept of quantum computing have been coming. So we realize that these things become very important. So advanced digital technology usage is one of the basic principles of the GDC. Equitable and meaningful inclusion in digital economy. Yeah, that means in the digital economy or the gains from the digital economy, those should also be equitable for everybody. Next, accessible and affordable data and digital technology. That means if they are not accessible, that means in certain regions you do not have access to that. Or on the other hand, if it is not affordable, then what will happen? It is again out of the reach, and the principle that lies in the inclusion, then automatically that will not be adhered to and people would be excluded. So what is important? Accessible and affordability. Next is safety and security. Again important because again I talked about privacy, cyber security dimensions. Next is creativity. Now you all know that when we are talking about the digital platforms, they have a lot to do with the creativity because earlier, before the digital revolution took place, there were only few mediums through which people could have shown their creativity. Let us assume there are few channels. Now, let me take an example of few actors. You would be seeing that the main source of representation or showing their art was either through films or through television channels or the shows that used to come. Now, do you realize with the entry of YouTube and so many websites and all, you realize that people can basically use their creativity, show them, and that has actually helped them to reach the fame and also even earn much more than the mainstream actors. To realize that it is basically aiming at creativity on one hand. Second is creativity with respect to neo technologies that come. That is again a major dimension over here. 10th is public private partnership. That means it is not something that the government alone can do. It is not something that the private sector alone can do. You need a coordination between these, or rather all the stakeholders that are present there. So these are the principles of GDC. Let's move ahead. What are the threats at the lacuna which have been mentioned even in the article? And let us see them. First, openness versus IPR, intellectual property rights. You'll be realizing we are focusing on, let us say, openness, or let us say accessibility to everybody, or let us say sharing between the companies, let us say data and all, but you realize that might infringe the intellectual property rights. Some companies might not adhere towards sharing the data. For example, in the case of Telegram, now you'll be realizing that the other companies, let us say WhatsApp, Instagram, or the other companies are basically coordinating. But Telegram till now, which is a Russian company, says that we are not going to adhere to certain rules like the other companies which are in an alliance. So what happens? That creates issues with respect to, let us say, conflict being created. So these things can arise again. Next is emphasis on the digital technology to self-regulate. Now what happens? One of the provisions is self-regulation. Once you emphasize on self-regulation, that means the companies have to regulate themselves, because this is in a way non-binding. So once the emphasis on self-regulation comes, then again all the principles that we have read, inclusion, affordability, accessibility, takes a back seat. This is again an issue because these are GDCs, a non-binding aspect. Next is increasing collection of data. That means privacy issues. We are talking about data usage by the private or the, let us say, the government departments also. We realize then again, where is the privacy concern here? How is that going to be dealt? That is again not being answered properly. Next is monopolistic threats. See, today if I take an example of Google, you know that everybody is using Google. Now almost everybody while using Google goes to various websites, your Google locations are there, you're using GPay as a means of payments. So now Google has data with respect to each and every activity that you're doing, every place you are going, every payment that you're making. So do you realize that if right now in a way Google has a monopoly today, if they say that we are going to shut, let us say, YouTube, or they're going to shut Google Maps, or they're going to shut, let us say, Google search engine, do you realize that what will happen? It will basically stagnate the whole economy. So with respect to digital revolution that is taking place, it is very, very important that we need to have multiple players that are there. You would be seeing that when the websites were hacked, with respect to the government websites being hacked of latest, you will be realizing all those were based on Microsoft faced an issues, but those based on Linux did not face an issue. Now, over dependence on one company created a problem? Yes or no? So similarly, remember, when we have monopoly, let us say only one market player, that creates ripple effects and problems that are created. So that is why we realize that we need to have Indian-based companies and startups that are related to cyber security, that are related to, let us say, operating systems being developed, being boosted in order to prevent certain further crises coming up again. So this again, monopoly threats can be there. So these are the dimensions with respect to GDC that you should be knowing. This can be asked in your prelims very well through the various options given. What are the principles, what are the objectives, what are the problems? Along with it, it can be asked in your mains examination, or even this can be taken as a case study with respect to the digital revolution that is taking place. So let's move ahead to the next topic. Next is, why is the textile industry struggling to perform better? Now, please understand, this becomes very important not only from the prelims, because it is a part of your economic geography. Along with it, it is a very important part of your economic paper GS3. Now, see, what is this article talking about? See, the article says that with respect to the textile industry and the apparel industry, by 2040, 2030, what is our aim? Our aim is to have a total business of close to $350 billion, which will create 3.5 crore jobs, extra jobs, adding to the present jobs that are there. Right now, when I'm talking with respect to the present status, what is the present status of the textile industry? We'll be realizing that $153 billion is a business that is being going on. Along with it, out of 153, 110 billion is from the domestic business. That means the remaining part, that is close to 43 billion, is with respect to the export that we basically do. Now, currently, there is an employment of 10.5 million people who are employed directly and indirectly through various interlinkages. Now, this is the present status. This is something that we are aiming at. But the problem that is arising, please understand, post 2022-23, there is a slump. That means a downfall in the export and the domestic demand. So, post 2022 and 23, there is a slump. Slump is a downfall within exports in the domestic market, and that is raising a concern, because if this trend is continuing, then this will thread the targets that we have here, right? That means we all very well know that the major contributory to the textile industry is the MSME sector, in particular the small industries. If certain problems happen, you will see large scale unemployment being created. Various problems with respect to export markets, with let us say various policies that are there, can basically hurt this particular industry very badly. So we need to see why this particular slump is there. Then along with it, we will see a brief idea of this industry other than what is mentioned in the article, and we'll analyze that. See, the reasons for the slump that are mentioned in your article, for that matter, is high cost of the raw material and the cotton. Please understand that we basically import cotton, right? And because of that, what happens is that because higher cost is there, so overall the manufacturing cost becomes high. And when it becomes high, then in the competition race, you are somewhat very behind with respect to the competitors. So this is one of the reasons. Growing imports again, plus what has been done is government has imposed 10% import duty on cotton. Now adding to the other adversaries, already it was expensive. Now when 10% duty on import has been done, when those small industries majorly who are basically dealing with the textile, you realize that when they are importing also, then 10% duty is added. It further adds burden to their budget or budgetary systems, which basically makes them non-profitable. And then it becomes difficult for them to even survive. Next is geopolitical tensions. Now what happens is that there are certain markets, you'll be seeing the Middle East regions and the other regions where already geopolitical tensions are taking place. Now, those are the countries where India was also exporting their products. Supposingly, with respect to Nepal also, we see that there are certain issues earlier, a few years back also, there were certain issues with respect to it getting closer to China. And then we saw that relations between India and Nepal deteriorating. And what was the outcome? That they imposed certain restrictions where they were more favoring the Chinese import of clothes rather than the Indian clothes. What happens? Geopolitical tensions, whether it is Middle East, whether it is with the neighbors, are basically going to hurt your export and the overall business. So geopolitical issues. Next again, e-commerce sector and the traditional business disruption. What is going on? E-commerce entry has got to do with a lot of brands, even foreign brands. They manufacturing at a very cheaper rate. Let us say from the neighboring countries, they can import let us say the traditional wear. Now what is going on? They are favoring, let us say, even inferior quality clothes are being created, is very often being bought by the people. So now one is the sector with respect to the e-commerce sector, which is selling the clothes at a cheaper price, much cheaper, because the companies are so big that they can, let us say, even if they're losing on selling those clothes, they're still overall going to be profitable, because those companies, let us like Amazon and Flipkart, are very humongous. They can afford to accept the shock of those losses. But what is happening, the traditional shops that we have across India are the ones who are going to suffer overall, and they are the ones who are losing very badly in the competition race with these giants. What happens when these industries, e-commerce has entered a traditional sector, for example, selling even lehengas on online, selling even, let us say, traditional wares also. Now that is hurting the traditional market sector with just selling the clothes. That means overall the value chain addition is being hurt, and it creates disruption. So e-commerce sector has again created a lot of disruption. Next is rural and semi-urban now are preferring multi-brand stores. Now this is a major transition that is taking place. Earlier, this wasn't there. With the digital revolution and the entry of the, we see market FDI being, let us say, with respect to certain brands coming in, liberalized. So what is going on is people are going to stores where they can buy, let us say, branded clothes also. This is being prevalent or present in your article also. Semi-urban and rural people are also buying. Now this is hurting the traditional industries also. This is a change in the behavior, because as we see that people are more moving towards certain brands. This was something that was never a part of Indian culture as such. This is something, a Western connotation, where brand-centric shopping was a focus of the primary region. Now this is something that has entered the Indian mentality. Now this is something that is creating a lot of disruption with respect to the traditional garment sector that was prevailing in India. Now see, understand this. Extra knowledge which I'm giving you, this is the process, this is the output. In the textile industry, you have various phases and aspects that are associated. First, let us say raw material. The raw material can be, let us say, cotton, jute, silk, and wool. Next phase from the raw material is a process of ginning. Ginning means, let us say, if you have cotton, with the cotton, raw cotton that you have taken from the plant, you will be having cotton along with various seeds that are there. So ginning is a process where separation of the fiber, let us say the cotton fiber, from the seed is taking place. So this is ginning, then you get a fiber out of it. Next step is spinning. Spinning is, that means when you have, let us say, cotton, and now that is fiber to yarn. Conversion of fiber to yarn is known as spinning. What is yarn? That means if you have, let us say, cotton, that is basically, let us say, converted into long strands of cotton. That is basically known as yarn. Now, next is weaving and knitting. Converting this yarn or those threads that are there to a fabric is known as weaving or knitting. Now, please understand, from the segment of raw material till the segment of weaving and knitting, this is known as the yarn and the fiber segment. Now, next is the processing and the garment apparel production. This is when you have these fabric with you that goes to, let us say, some industries where it is processed, and then finally the garment is created, which is the final product, that is garment or apparel production. This is the complete chain which is involved in your, basically, the textile industry. Now this is the yarn and the fiber segment. This is the finishing of the garment segment. The thing is that we have lot of dimensions and problems with each one of them. Over here, relatively again at a better place, but when we come to the finishing garments aspect, we realize that it is dominated majorly by the very small sector that is basically using old technology. Then there is, let us say, unsustainable mechanism through which it is being created. Quality of garment creation again is not fine. So that means what happens, this finishing garment sector is where the major problem is currently lying. Do you realize that India even exports yarns to the other countries? But when it comes to the finishing garment sector, we are way backward. Now see, understand why. 95% of the fabric production by the small scale industries is taking place. Along with it, these industries use antiquated, that means old technologies which are, let us say, even 50 years old. Now using those technology at present is absolutely making you or kicking you out of the competition. Next is imports are basically, imports are stagnated in a way because 10% duty is being imposed, plus exports issue is there because when the small scale industries that are producing are not matching the global standards, that is what creates an issue. In India, average there are 100 machines per one factory. In Bangladesh, there are 500 machines per factory. That means they are not small scale. They might be medium, even large, even medium scale industries that are there in Bangladesh. So that is why you will be realizing that Bangladesh has, before this political disruption that take place, it was one of the major hubs of export of the garments. Even Vietnam for that matter. But in India, it has not been there because 95% production over here is confined to the small scale industries. Again, lack of foreign investment. Again, there is problem related to that. That also creates various problems with this industry. What are the steps government has taken? There are various schemes that government has basically come up, but again, they have not helped the small scale industries, which are very vulnerable. Like amended technology upgradation fund scheme for the integrated textile parks, Power Text India, Jute Eye Care, National Technical Textile Mission. We had done this earlier also. So these have certain schemes, but again, they only a few industries which are relatively larger in size have been benefiting, not all. Next, draft on the national sports policy. Now this has been released for the public consultation where people's views of the people have been asked and people can basically suggest what all changes need to be made. So we need to see over here, what is the objective? To position India as a global sports powerhouse. That means should be a hub where all those major sports activities are taking place. So later on, we realize that the culture of sports is inculcated over here, where collaboration through the government, sports federation, private sector and the public should take place. So that means a culture of sports as a powerhouse, not only in one dimension, but a multiple and holistic dimension should be created in India as an objective. What are the features? Building on the past initiatives. So what are initiatives that we have had in the past? Like, for example, we see the NSP, National Sports Policy 2001, Khelo India scheme, Target Olympic Podium scheme. There have been various schemes. Learning from those schemes, improving on them and adding to them is basically one of the objectives. There are the features. Next is 5 principles that the National Sports Policy Draft 2024 is based on. First is excellence on the global stage. That means when these athletes are being sent, they should already be nurtured and trained with such good facilities that when they perform at a global stage, they are able to win and bring laurels for the country. Economic growth. Now, because this sports industry itself is a major economic dimension, not only with respect to organizing, but also with respect to production of goods and services that are related to that. For example, various psychologists, physiotherapists, these specializing in the sports industries are coming up. Now that itself is creating a very niche market that basically is creating a lot of employment opportunities. Along with that, production of goods which are related to the sports industries. Social development, again, if, for example, those people, when you are, let us say, factory being set in a sports factory being set in such a region, it will help in the regional development. The people who are associated with them will help in the social upliftment. Now, person who, let us say, is representing India, you do not belong to any religion or a caste at that time. You are representing India. Now, you realize that these himself, basically, when you win some medals, you prove yourself, it basically changes the whole setup of your family also. Because you not only bring laurels and the country is proud of you, but along with it, you'll be realizing that it basically changes the socio-economic dimensions of the country also. Cultural integration, integrating the culture and the traditional sports that have been there, right? So those things can be integrated with the sports. Next is education integration. Education with respect to sports and all those dimensions should be integrated and special courses should be launched, which people can or students can basically take up. So these are the broad perspective right now. Please remember that right now it is a draft. As more and more suggestions come, the changes will be made accordingly. Now, this is a very important article that has come up in the editorial. This is rather interesting. Why? Because it basically tells you that how the United Kingdom has basically transitioned from a country that was based or had a major production of energy from the coal, and to now the last coal plant basically being shut there. And then it basically compares with respect to India. Shall India also shut it down or not? Or what should the practices be? See, what the interesting thing over here is, it tells the journey of United Kingdom. But it also tells that this is not something that is this transition from a coal-based energy production country to something that is completely shutting down coal is not a journey of few years. It has been a journey of more than 50, 60 years. Which we now see appears to be a short journey, supposedly after the Paris Agreement. But the reality is that it is a journey which has going on from last 50-60 years. So with respect to India also, when we say which is a developing country, we need to understand that coal is currently one of the major energy sources and we cannot simply phase out. We can phase down, we cannot phase out. Yes, we have to promote the renewable energy. That is what is being discussed over here. So let us see what the article or the in this editorial basically says. Over here, it says, in the introductory passage, the writer says that shutting of Britain's last coal-fired power plant at Nottinghamshire is one of the things that the article starts with. So this was the last coal-based power plant that was there in Britain, which has been shut now. Now we see that the calls to replicate it. Now what is being happening is this example of United Kingdom is being quoted to the developing countries like India and China by the Western powers also, that they should also shut down their coal powers and move towards the renewable energy in a way, let us say, because let us say United Kingdom is also shut down. Now lies the aspect we need to understand. This shutting down of the coal plant is not something which is an outcome of the Paris Agreement of 2015. No, the COP21, that means 2015 Paris Agreement, which basically gave which expected the countries to give their own targets with respect to the reduction in the emissions. So it is not an outcome of the Paris Agreement or COP21. It is something that has been taking place from a very long time. See, in 1952, there was an event known as the Great Smog in London. Please understand this. Great Smog in London in 1952. Because of the thermal plants being close to the vicinity of London, a lot of pollution was there, and the smog was so dangerous, much more dangerous than that what we see in the months of October and November in Delhi NCR region. So people were not able to breathe, people were getting ill. It was a very disastrous like situation because of the pollution that was created, because majorly of the thermal power plants powered by the coal. So this basically got into the minds of the political leaders at that time that they need to transition or remove, or let us say start phasing out coal. It started from that time, not from the Paris Agreement. That is why we see Clean Air Act 1956 was basically enacted, where phasing out of the coal-based power plants started. One or more reason was that because United Kingdom was dependent upon USSR at that time, Soviet Republic at that time, for the import of coal. So in order, because the Cold War was going on between United States and United States and the USSR, and United Kingdom, being an ally of United States, wanted to reduce the dependence of coal from Russia from the USSR. So what did they do? One of the reasons was, let us further reduce the coal import from USSR. That would be in accordance with the Clean Air Act, which basically already was aiming at reducing the amount of power plants based on coal that were being, let us say, started. So basically a restriction on them. Now what we see is this transition from a country that was powered by coal to, let us say, now phasing out the last power plant based on coal is a journey which began 60 years ago, not something that is outcome of 5-6 years, 60 years ago. Similarly, we realize that mines closure by Margaret Thatcher was also some of the events that took place during this time, during the 1980s and all. You realize that when this event was taking place, there were various protests. But again, Margaret Thatcher was of the view that if again events like the Great Smog take place, it is going to disrupt the economy of London and United Kingdom as a whole. So there is an important need to shut down slowly or the coal mines and move towards alternative sources. Now please understand, when we talk about India and China with respect to, let us say, the Paris Agreement and all, we realize that India and China have pledged to phase down, not phase out coal. Phase down means, that means they will slowly reduce the dependence on coal. They did not say that we are going to completely avoid the usage of coal. This is very important. Why they say that? Because see, the countries, the Western countries have already utilized or emitted such large amounts of emission, and they're continuing still. And now when they have transitioned towards a renewable energy based source of energy, so what they are trying to impose, let us say, pressure on the developing countries. That is why India and China is very categorical. They have said we are going to phase down slowly, not phase out coal right now. Along with it, India has a target of net zero emission by 2070 and meet half of its energy from the non-renewable by 2050. So that is something that India has targets, and that is again very reasonable targets. If you compare it with United Kingdom also, it took more than 60 years to transition. So we can just not pressurize. The Western countries cannot simply pressurize India in that respect, because our economy is dependent on the energy, and the energy we are getting is from a large major amount is from the thermal power plants, and out of the thermal plants also we have the coal based plant as a major energy source. As we move ahead in this paragraph, he sees that emission with respect to the total emission that are done, the number one country is United States, second is China, and third is India. India's third with respect to that, and even Western countries are pressurizing India that they need to reduce the emissions. India's third in spite of having such a large population. If we see the per capita emission, we'll see India 2 ton per capita emission with respect to India. With respect to United Kingdom, it is 5.5 ton. That means every individual in United Kingdom per year is emitting, let us say, carbon dioxide emissions of close to 5.5 ton. In India, it is basically 2 tons. So in that perspective also, it is less. Now, we over here see that this particular paragraph basically gives you a historical aspect, that first coal mine was basically mined at Raniganj, and those dimensions are given just to show how the coal mining started in India. But more importantly, as we go ahead, we realize that we cannot simply shut down the coal mining, or let us say power generation, because it, according to the government of India also, India is yet to reach its peak production and consumption of coal, which would be around 2030 and 2035. Right? So we are still close to 6 to 8 years from that peaking level, where again the energy demand will rise and automatically the production and consumption will increase. So we cannot simply phase down it immediately. Next is, we need to understand, which is mentioned over here, 70% energy output we get is from coal. 350 operational mines of coal are there, and 120 have been planned to further open. So that means we are already planning to have more coal mines, because our dependence is on that. Along with that, we are having non-renewable emphasis. That is fine, but this is also something that is going to go together till at least 20, 30, 35, and slowly then we'll reduce. Next is 10 years from now, it is going to generate more than 1 million jobs. The coal sector is going to generate more than 1 million jobs. That is also an opportunity which we can simply not negate. Next is, please understand, that is why over here it said direct comparison of phasing and phasing out cannot be made over here. Please understand. This article says, so we cannot compare India and United Kingdom in this way, because United Kingdom took 60 years. Now, if we are now phasing at least we need a good amount of years so that we can slowly transition our economy, and still we know that we have very much dependent on the coal-based energy which we consume. So that is why comparison cannot be made. So what the article further says is that, okay, this is fine, but we need to understand that smooth, holistic, and a transparent planning framework should be there, which has India has already made with respect to 2070 net zero emissions, and half of the energy needs to be met by 2050 through the non-renewable energy. So that is already created, and India should adhere to that without neglecting its own interest. That is the most important element. That is what is basically is talked about in this article. Now, let us move quickly to the just a minute. Okay, let us quickly move to the questions that are there. Please pause the video and see the question. Pause the video, 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 see the question. These are your answers. So this is what was there from today's editorial and as well as news analysis. Hope you like that. Please keep on reading your newspapers. This video is going to be helpful for your not only understanding the newspapers, also a slowly improvement in your English abilities and analytical ability. Along with it, we are going to add new initiatives like, as I told you, news in shots and other dimensions to make it more interesting and more inclusive. Take care and have a nice day. Jai Hind.